All right, so we're back and ready to dive even deeper into the Law of One.
Definitely ready.
We had such a great response to our first exploration. Everyone seems really fascinated by this material, and we're excited to continue the journey together.
Yeah, for sure.
So we're picking up with session 2, recorded on January 20th, 1981, and today we're going to be focusing on a few key
Oh,
things.
yeah.
Ra's historical background, their perspective on teaching and learning, and some initial revelations about crystal healing, and the pyramids. Always got to have the pyramids. Got to have
Curious.
so much to unpack.
Let's get into it.
Let's jump in.
So, right off the bat in this session, Ra introduces themselves as the social memory complex.
Okay.
And this is kind of like a big one, right? It's like trying to wrap your head around a unified consciousness where all these individual experiences kind of merge together and shape their understanding and how they communicate. It's kind of a wild concept.
Yeah, it's like a hive mind almost.
Yeah, almost like a hive mind, but with a kind of spiritual bent to it.
Right, and they also make a point of saying that they respond to those who align their distortions with theirs.
Right. So it's not just anyone who can tap into this knowledge or this communication.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a certain kind of resonance that needs to be there.
Okay, so then we get to the idea of creating a book from these communications. And the questioner proposes this to Ra.
And Ra's totally on board with it. They see their contact as communication from the one to the one through distortion acceptable for meaning.
I like that.
Yeah, it's a pretty profound way of putting it.
It is, and they acknowledge that, not everyone's going to grasp it fully, right?
Yeah, they're not expecting universal comprehension. They're aware that there will always be distortion in the way that this information is received and interpreted.
And that actually ties into something I was thinking about earlier. Even with their advanced understanding, it seems like there's this inherent limitation to their ability to perfectly transmit their knowledge across.
Right. It's like, even with the best intentions, you can't guarantee the desired outcome, especially when you're dealing with something as complex as consciousness and individual autonomy.
Exactly. So it kind of makes you wonder about the ripple effect. Even with the best intentions, there could be unintended consequences.
For sure. I mean, look at all the things that humans have done with the best intentions that have gone awry.
Right, exactly. So it's like a constant theme throughout history and even on a cosmic scale.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they agree to the book idea, but their reasoning is interesting. It's not about spreading the word to as many people as possible.
It's more about helping to regularize and crystallize the listener's own vibrational patterns. It's like a tuning fork effect.
I like that analogy.
Yeah, so by exposing yourself to their frequency, it might help you resonate more clearly with your own understanding.
So it's not about giving you the answers, it's about helping you find your own.
Right, exactly.
That's pretty cool.
And then there's that powerful statement that they make, to teach, learn is the law of one in one of its most elementary distortions. So think about that. Every time you try to teach someone something, or every time you try to learn something new, you're engaging with a fundamental aspect of this universal law.
That's a really powerful way to look at it.
Yeah, it reframes the whole idea of education and knowledge sharing.
So after they establish this kind of foundation, the questioner naturally wants to know more about Ray's background.
Yeah, like where they come from, their history, their interactions with Earth, any incarnations they might have had.
It's a totally natural human thing to want to put things into a timeline, right?
Of course we love our timelines.
Yeah, but Ra kind of redirects the conversation.
Yeah, they say that focusing on several thousand of your years creates a spurious type of interest.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's like they're suggesting that getting bogged down in the chronological details kind of misses the point. They're more interested in exploring the philosophical principles, the underlying truths.
Okay, so not so much about the dates and the names, but more about the concepts.
Right.
But they do give us some historical context.
They say that about 11,000 years ago, they were part of this group called the Confederation, and they came to Earth to interact with two cultures that were already pretty aligned with the idea of universal consciousness.
Wow. So advanced civilizations 11,000 years ago.
Yeah, it's mind-blowing, right?
That's incredible.
And Ra talks about their naive belief that they could learn through direct contact without disturbing free will.
Okay, wait a minute. They're this advanced social memory complex, and they were naive.
Yeah, it seems kind of contradictory, right?
It does make you wonder if maybe their understanding of free will is different from ours, or if even highly evolved beings can make mistakes when it comes to interacting with other consciousnesses.
I think that's a really good point. It challenges our assumptions about what it means to be advanced or evolved.
Yeah, it's like maybe there's always something more to learn, even for beings as far along as Ra.
Right.
So how do they try to learn with these cultures?
Well, they focused on the technical side of things. They used crystals within specific time-space ratios to try and heal mind-body-spirit complex distortions.
And that led to the creation of the pyramids.
Exactly.
Wow, so the pyramids weren't just tombs or monuments.
Not according to Ra, they were tools for healing and initiation.
That's a pretty different perspective than what you usually hear.
It is, and it really opens up a whole new way of thinking about these ancient structures.
So what happened? Did it work?
Well, there was a major distortion that arose. The technology ended up being mostly available to those in power, which went against the whole principle of the law of one.
Oh, so even with the best intentions, their actions had unintended consequences.
Yeah, it seems to be a recurring theme.
Definitely. So what did Ra do?
They decided to leave, but they emphasized that they never left your vibration.
Because they felt responsible for the distortions they had caused?
Exactly. They felt a sense of accountability for their actions, even though they were unintentional.
That's pretty profound.
It shows a deep level of responsibility.
So they left, but they didn't completely abandon Earth.
No, they later tried to contact rulers in Egypt, which they refer to as the Holy Land.
Interesting. And who did they end up connecting with?
They connected with a pharaoh named Akhenaten during the 18th dynasty.
Okay, and who was this Akhenaten guy?
Well, Ra describes him as a wanderer, which means he was a soul from another planet or dimension who incarnated on Earth.
Okay.
And they say that he was able to blend his distortions with theirs, meaning he could understand and interpret their communications.
So he was like a bridge between Ra and humanity.
Yeah, you could say that, and Akhenaten was so influenced by Ra's teachings that he changed his name to honor the sun disk, Akhenaten, which Ra considered a close distortion to their own nature as a social memory complex connected to the one creator.
And what was the significance of the sun disk?
Well, it represented the idea of a single unified source of creation.
So Akhenaten was essentially promoting monotheism.
Exactly. He became convinced of the vibration of one and decreed the law of one.
Wow, that's a huge shift from the polytheistic beliefs that were prevalent at the time.
It was, and it shows the power of Ra's communication and Akhenaten's receptivity to it.
But did it last?
Unfortunately, no, Akhenaten's beliefs were not widely accepted, and after his reign, things went back to the way they were.
So another example of even the best efforts not always having the desired outcome.
Yeah, it's a reminder that change can be a slow and difficult process.
Definitely. But Ra does point out that this pattern continued until Muhammad delivered what they considered a more understandable articulation of mind-body-spirit relationships.
Right, so even though Akhenaten's efforts didn't result in lasting change, they did contribute to a gradual shift in consciousness over time.
It's like a long game.
Yeah, you could say that.
So let's move on to crystal healing, because that's something that a lot of people are interested in.
Definitely. And Ra gives us some really interesting insights into how it works.
Okay, so how does crystal healing work according to Ra?
Well, they say the principle lies in understanding the hierarchical nature of the physical body's illusion.
Okay, so there's more to our bodies than meets the eye.
Exactly. And different crystals interact with energies at various levels of this hierarchy.
Like what kind of levels?
Well, they mentioned the spiritual body distortions, moving from spirit to mind, and imbalances between mind and body.
So it's not just about sticking a pretty crystal on your forehead.
Not quite.
There's a lot more to it.
There is, and Ra emphasizes the importance of purified channels.
What do they mean by that?
They're talking about the healer's own crystallization and alignment with planetary and cosmic energy fields.
So the healer needs to be in a certain state of being to effectively use crystals.
Exactly. They need to be a clear conduit for the energy.
It's like they're a tuning fork themselves.
Exactly.
And Ra also mentions the importance of specific shapes and placements for balancing energies.
Right. It's not just about the type of crystal, but also how it's used.
Interesting. So there's a whole science to it.
Definitely. Now, they don't go into detail about all the different crystals and their properties in this session, but they make a really interesting statement. They say that a highly purified channel filled with the love light of one could potentially use crystalline structures like diamond or ruby in almost any application with initiation.
Wow. So with enough purification and training, you could become like a master crystal healer?
Yeah, that's a pretty powerful concept.
And what about initiation? What does that involve?
Well, Ra mentions persevering through various distortion leavings.
So it sounds like it's not an easy process.
No, it seems like it requires a lot of inner work and dedication.
Okay, let's move on to the pyramids.
All right.
So the questioner asks directly if Ra was responsible for building the pyramids and what their purpose was.
And Ra confirms that they participated in constructing the larger pyramids.
I knew it.
And they say something really profound. The stones are alive.
Wow, that completely changes how you think about those structures.
Yeah, it does. It's like they're not just inert objects, but part of a living energetic system.
So what was their purpose? Why build these giant living structures?
Well, Ra explains that they had two main purposes.
Okay, what were they?
First, they were designed as properly oriented spaces for initiation.
For those seeking to become purified channels for the law of one.
Exactly like we were just talking about with crystal healing.
So the pyramids were like giant crystal healing chambers.
In a way, yeah. And the second purpose was to guide initiates in developing healing practices for individuals and the planet.
So they were centers for both personal and planetary transformation.
That's right.
Incredible. And Ra also mentions that the pyramids were charged by crystals and initiates who worked together to balance the incoming energy of the one creation with planetary distortions.
So they were like giant energetic regulators for the Earth.
That's a pretty amazing concept.
It is. And Ra says that this was part of a larger effort by other members of the Confederation who built other crystal-bearing structures around the world.
So like a global network of energetic centers.
Yeah, it's like they were trying to create a harmonious balance of energy across the planet.
That's incredible.
Now, before moving on, the questioner has a couple more questions about the pyramids.
Oh yeah, like what?
They want to know about the capstone that was supposedly on top of the Great Pyramid and the technique that was used to move those massive blocks.
Ah, the age-old mysteries.
But Rod defers these questions to the next session.
Oh, come on.
Yeah, they leave us hanging a bit.
Well, I guess we'll have to wait for our next deep dive to find out more.
Exactly. But the session doesn't end there.
Oh, there's more.
There's more. There's a really interesting discussion about the well-being of the instrument, the person who's channeling Ra.
Okay, so what's going on with the instrument?
Well, it seems they're experiencing some fatigue, and the questioner wants to know how to make them more comfortable and improve their ability to channel.
That makes sense. It's a pretty demanding process, I imagine.
Yeah, and Ra's response is really insightful. They basically say that the instrument isn't being used correctly.
Oh, interesting. So how should they be using the instrument?
Rod gives some very specific instructions for purifying the vibrations and aligning the instrument.
Like a ritual?
Exactly. It involves forming a circle of one and verbally repeating a specific dialogue of questions and answers about the law of one and Ra's role.
What kind of dialogue?
Well, it goes like this. What is the law? The law is, one, why are we here? We seek the law of one. Why do we seek Ra? Ra is an humble messenger of the law of one.
It's like a mantra.
Yeah, it's a powerful affirmation that helps to center and focus the energy.
And then there's that part where they say, rejoice then, and purify this place in the law of one. Let no thought form enter the circle. We have walked about this instrument, for the law is one.
Right. It's like they're creating a sacred space, a protective bubble around the instrument.
And what about the physical setup? Is there anything specific they need to do?
Oh, yeah. There are a lot of details.
Like what?
Well, the instrument needs to be in a trance state with their head pointed 20 degrees north by northeast.
Okay.
And they need to have a virgin chalice of water at their head.
Interesting. Why a virgin chalice?
Well, it symbolizes purity and clarity.
Okay, that makes sense.
And they also need to have the Bible in the center, open to the Gospel of John chapter 1.
And why the Bible specifically?
Ross says it's the book that's most frequently touched and aligned with the law of one in the instrument's mind.
So it's about using objects that have a personal resonance with the instrument.
Exactly. And they also need to have some incense and a virgin censer next to the Bible, a white candle behind the Bible, and the instrument needs to be wearing a white robe, covered and prone with their eyes covered.
Wow, that's a very specific and detailed protocol.
Yeah, it is. It shows how important the energetic environment is for this type of communication.
It's like setting the stage for a sacred performance.
Yeah, you could say that.
And what about sessions that occur when there's no sunlight?
Ross says that the instrument should be called before any artificial light is used.
So they're really sensitive to light.
It seems so.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, it really underscores the subtle energies at play in this type of channeling.
Okay, so to wrap up this deep dive, we've covered a lot of ground. We've explored Ra's historical interactions with Earth, their initial attempts at healing and pyramid construction, the concept of teach learning, and the specific procedures for facilitating their communication.
It's been quite a journey.
What stands out to you the most from all of this?
I think, for me, the idea of Ra's naive belief in their early interactions with humanity is really thought-provoking.
Yeah, why is that?
Well, it shows that even beings as advanced as Ra can misjudge the impact of their actions on free will.
And it's a reminder that even with the best intentions, we can't always control the outcome.
Exactly. And I think the detailed instructions for the channeling process are also really fascinating.
Yeah, what do you make of all that ritual?
Well, I think it suggests that this type of communication isn't just about passive reception. It requires a very specific energetic alignment and mental focus.
Like a science almost.
Yeah, there's a precision to it that's really intriguing.
So our next deep dive is going to be even more exciting because we're going to delve into the questions that Ra deferred, like the secrets of the pyramid's capstone and the methods for moving those massive blocks.
I can't wait.
But until then, we encourage you to really ponder the ideas we've explored today and consider what questions arise for you.
What resonates with you? What challenges your beliefs?
Perhaps reflecting on the interplay between intention action and unforeseen outcomes in your own life could give you a new perspective on Ra's experiences with Earth cultures.
It's all about making connections and finding meaning in these ancient teachings.
So keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep an open mind.
Until next time.
See you then.